You all didn't get swept away in the non-existent storms here. And hopefully you're surviving the winter tundra that we now have for the next few days. Let's just jump in here. We're going to start with our 8 principles here. And so you know the drill. I'll read the principle, and you guys get to follow with the beatitude that goes with it. Here in a couple weeks, I'm going to have some of you start doing this. Start reading the principles and leading us in that. All right, get some practice in. But for now, here we go. The road to recovery. Realize I'm not God. I admit that I am powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong thing and that my life is unmanageable. Earnestly believe that God exists, that I matter to Him, and that He has the power to help me recover. There we go. Consciously choose to commit all my life and will to Christ's care and control. Openly examine and confess my faults to myself, to God, and to someone I trust. Voluntarily submit to every change God wants to make in my life and humbly ask Him to remove my character defects. Evaluate all my relationships, offer forgiveness to those who have hurt me, and make amends for harm I've done to others, except when to do so would harm them or others. Reserve a daily time with God for self-examination, Bible reading, and prayer in order to know God and His will for my life and to gain the power to follow His will. And then yield myself to God to be used to bring this good news to others, both by my example and by my words. All right, excellent. Hey, welcome to week 4. Week 4. I've been enjoying this. I hope you guys have as well. Looking forward to future conversations, ongoing conversations. We're just kind of in the nitty-gritty right now, where we're talking logistics and things like that. But really, again, like I said last week, the meat of this is kind of our step study group discussions. That's where the good stuff is going to take place. This stuff is good as well, but the really good stuff is the small group discussions. Real quick, I just wanted to mention last Wednesday, I mentioned another site visit to Marion, to their Celebrate Recovery, on May 2nd. And so I talked to Greg from there yesterday, and we're all confirmed for that. And so that'll be May 2nd, and what we'll do is we will leave here from the church at 5:30. We'll just carpool up there together. We'll plan to eat there at their Celebrate Recovery meal, and then we'll get a chance to participate in their large group. And then after the large group, typically what we do, we don't go in and sit in one of the open share groups just because of group dynamics and things like that. But we usually get a chance to just talk with Greg, who's the CR pastor, and some of their team, and just kind of pick their brains a little bit and hear a little bit about what they do. With that in mind, Pastor Greg wanted me to kind of pass along, if there are, as we work towards that May 2nd visit, if there are any questions or things that you would like to hear from the Marion leadership team, then pass that along to me, and I'll pass those along to Greg, just so that they can kind of be prepared to answer any specific questions that you have. So if there's things about what it might look like when this happens or that, or anything like that you might have, that you want to hear someone who has or a team that has a lot of experience with CR, let me know that, and I'll pass that along to Greg, and it's going to be a good visit, all right? As we get a little bit closer in the next week or so, I'll just kind of have some sort of sign up just so we can plan vehicles and things like that. So also, if there's someone that like is not a part of this group, but you're like, it would be cool for them to see this and to experience it as well, by all means, the more the merrier. They don't have to be part of this step study group. We'll take multiple vehicles, 6 vehicles if we need to. We'll rent a bus, all right? Remember the old bus? Yeah, there you go. Can you steal one for us? By steal, I mean borrow, of course. Borrow for one night. What's that? Yeah. Hi, my name is Josh, and I struggle with larceny. I don't know if that's the right word. Thievery, whatever. Dishonesty. There we go. All right, so here we go. We're going to, kind of our training here, just for this part, is going to be super simple. Last week we talked about what does the large group setting look like. Tonight we're going to talk about what is the open share group format. What's that look like? So that's the full-size handout you have there. You got some blanks you can fill in there. When I was putting out my notes here, I didn't like highlight the words that fill in the blank. So if I'm going through this and you're like, what is that blank? Or maybe I didn't actually say what, just let me know. I'm sure it's in here and I'll find it. All right? So, open share group format. Open share groups are kind of, like I said, the groups that immediately follow large groups. So we go large groups into open share groups. And kind of the idea with open share group is that there's always a place and there's always a group that is available for folks to plug into, right? And you've heard me kind of talk about that. That's kind of the whole with Celebrate Recovery. We want it to be extremely easy and accessible for a newcomer, first, second, third time person to be able to find where they belong. And so the idea with open share groups is that there is a place for everyone to belong, regardless of kind of what their issue is. We want there to be a place, even if it's kind of a mixed issue open share group. We want there to be a place for them to go. Now, these are different from the step study groups. Hopefully, this is all starting to make sense now that you're kind of in the midst of this. What we're doing is more of a step study group, and these are different. We want to think of open share as kind of the entry level kind of group where everyone can go. And then the step studies are kind of the deeper level, more intensive, more require more commitment than an open share group. So with that in mind, though, sometimes we can maybe be confused that open share, like I'm not a newbie, so I don't really need to go to open share groups. That's not the case. We want open share groups to be for everyone, not just the newbies. And so that's kind of where some of the relationships start to build, is in those open share groups. So it's entry level, but it's not.
Went wrong. Try again.
I don't want to. There we go. I don't know what I was saying now. Oh, yeah, thank you. Open share groups are entry level, but they're not just for newcomers, right? It's kind of it's kind of not expected, but like to get the most out of a CR night, you want to go to the open share groups, right? It's not just for a newcomer. So when it comes to open share leaders, open share group leaders, a couple of things. We want folks who are well on their way to their own personal recoveries. And so that's why we're working through these things together now, so that we have a team of people who are kind of ready to be leader. Now, like if that's not where you're hoping to get plugged in, that's okay. But the idea here is that by the time we launch, we have a solid group of people who have been working on their own recovery for a while. And so when it's time to start up some new open share groups, we've got kind of a pool of people to choose from, right? Now, my goal is that as we launch and as we build this, that pool will just continue to grow as more people kind of work through Celebrate Recovery. Our pool of potential leaders will just continue to grow. So each group is going to have a leader and a co-leader, kind of on the same in the same group. Just that way, there's two leaders. They can help out, help facilitate As we mentioned before, the number of groups that we're going to have is still to be determined, but at minimum, we'll have one male group and one female group, right? As I'm looking at you guys, I started to think through launch and things like that and numbers and whatnot. The reality is, we already have 22 people who are committed to this, right? And so in my mind, I'm like, man, there's no reason we shouldn't be able to have multiple open share groups from the get-go, okay? Because we just have a solid group, and that's you guys, right? So, but at the very minimum, we'll start out with one male, one female, and then, but ideally, again, more specific issues. Jensen's not doing his job. Okay, so let's talk about the format of an open share group. Okay, after a large group, there'll probably be a 5 to 10 minute break, just restroom, coffee, because you're going to need coffee, right? So just a break in between there, and then everybody gets settled into their open share groups. And then here's kind of the way this is going to work. The leader will get started by introducing themselves. And so that's kind of where we talk about, hi, my name is Josh. I am a grateful believer in Jesus, and I struggle with bitterness and cynicism, all right? Or whatever your struggle may be, right? So they're going to introduce themselves that way, and then the leader will welcome everyone and open in prayer. I do believe that is your blanks there. Welcomes everyone and opens in prayer. That's kind of a very simple. Sometimes we can pray for a really long time. This is very simple, right? And so one of the recommendations is even kind of the shortened version of the Serenity Prayer, not the whole thing that we do at the end, but just the shortened version of that. So welcomes everyone and opens in prayer. Next, the leader will kind of go around the room, and everyone will have the opportunity to introduce themselves. And so with that, the leader's going to kind of give an explanation for the reason that we introduce ourselves the way that we do introduce ourselves. And so if you don't remember that, we introduce ourselves first by identifying as, in some way, as a believer in Jesus Christ who struggles with XYZ, fill in the blank, right? And remember, the significance there is that our identity is not found in our struggle. Our identity is found in Jesus, who also happens to struggle with whatever, right? And so there'll be a little bit of an explanation from the open share group leader about why we introduce ourselves the way we do, and then there'll be an opportunity to go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves. Now, something that's very key here when we're talking open share groups, it's important to remember that it's always okay for someone to pass. Okay, it's always okay for someone to pass. Typically, just from what I've seen and experienced, when it comes to just the introductions there, most people are going to say at least something. Even if they're not ready to kind of say what their struggle is, they'll at least introduce themselves as, Josh, grateful believer, or sometimes it may even just be Josh, because they don't know if they're a believer, right? They don't know if they believe this, but they're there, right? And so we want to celebrate that. So it's always okay to pass. Go around the room, introduction. After those introductions, the leader is going to read the small group guidelines. And so here's the thing. Adherence to these guidelines is one of the most important roles of an open share group leader. Just making sure everybody sticks to those small group guidelines. So they'll read those and just, I don't know if you remember, but in here there's the guidelines, but when I presented them, there's longer descriptions. As open share groups kind of start and have been developed and been doing this, they don't need to be the entire description, just a simple reminder of those guidelines. Then the leader will present the focus question. The focus question comes from the lesson during large group, and what this does is it helps relate the principles that were talked about to our own lives. So you'll see the focus question on your little bulletin insert for the one that we're getting ready to do after small group. Right at the very bottom, there's a focus question. So that is provided for every lesson. And so then what will happen is the leader will just kind of present that focus question. And then once again, we'll kind of take an opportunity to go around the room and allow anyone who wants to share specifically on that topic, like the lesson for the night. Anyone that wants to share is able to do that. Again, anyone can pass at any time. You don't have to share. But it's an opportunity for the group, the people in the group, to share specifically based on what the lesson was about. Okay? Then, after that is done, we will begin an open share time. And so this is an opportunity to kind of focus on struggles and or victories that aren't necessarily related to the focus question of that night. Does that make sense? So focus question is an opportunity to talk directly about the principle and the lesson that we talked about that night. The open share part is more about just in general, what are you struggling with this week, or what are the victories that you've had this week? It's more open-ended. With this in mind, we still need to stick to our 3 to 5 minute time frame per person so that everybody can share. Does that make sense? I will say, there's a caveat. This sometimes also happens, and I've seen this done, is the top focus question and the open share are kind of integrated, meaning after the introductions, it's just kind of going around in a circle, and you're welcome to share either relating to the focus question or just your personal struggles and victories for that week, right? So that kind of just depends on how the group flows, what that looks like. But we want an opportunity for both of those. And so then next is simply a wrap up. And that's just when we thank everyone for coming. Remind them that we're here again next week. Invite them to, if we're doing any sort of like desserts or coffee, anything like that afterwards, just an invitation to that, and then we'll close in prayer. Okay? Did I cover all the blanks on there? Because I didn't grab a sheet. What is that? Did I miss? Prayer. Close the meeting in prayer. Close the meeting in prayer. That's a good question. Can do either or. You can close with a serenity prayer, or it can be just a general prayer of blessing for all the people there. Yeah, that's a good question. Bob, do you? No, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. And that actually comes out when at some point we'll take those who are like wanting to lead an open share group. There'll be a more in-depth training for that, and that's one of the things that comes out there. That you will have a wide variety of folks. You'll have people who are experts at recovery. You'll have people who are brand new to recovery. You'll have people who are longtime believers, and you'll have people who aren't believers, not sure if they're believers, whatever, right? May have court-mandated appearances, and so they're just there to get the paper signed. So there will just be this wide variety of people. And because the open share group is kind of a collect-all place for everyone, there's going to be a wide variety. As we move into the step study, and next week I'm pretty sure we're talking about step study format, that's where it becomes more like these are your folks who are committed to this and want to take that next step. And so it's more likely that in there, most will identify as a believer. So, yeah. Good question. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, yeah. That's I didn't put that on here because that was a CR, like a Saddleback specific thing. They have I don't even remember what it's called now, but it's afterwards. It's like a fellowship, dessert, things like that. That's if we're doing any sort of like thing afterwards, then an invitation, encouragement to that. I can't remember what they call it. So you can just make up a wonderfully creative name for a post-CR fellowship event. Todd, did you? What's sorry, I don't have a paper. Oh yeah, it's just wrap up. Yeah, wrap up. Simple. Yeah, Karen. That's a really good question. If you include a meal time before, so let's just let's just throw out what I'm envisioning here, and we're still working out details. If we're able to partner with Hope Center for Meals, they stop serving at 6, which means that we would probably promote mealtime as 5:30. That way, 5:30 to 6, they can get served, they can finish up eating. With large groups starting at 6:30, large group would go to 6:30, from 6:30 to 7:30, and then open share group / any sort of like fellowship hangout would be another hour there. So if someone is here truly from the beginning to the end, that's a 3-hour section. Now, the way that it, like, not necessarily everyone has to be at the meal and things like that. So there is some flexibility, yeah. But the entire night, from start to finish, would essentially be 3 hours of time. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that would be a requirement for all the time, but certainly some kind of appearances here and there, you know what I mean? I don't think that, because the reality, like, the meal serves a couple of purposes. It's convenience, right? On a night where you're here, there's food for everyone, but it is also that kind of welcoming fellowship kind of thing. But it's not like, if you're leading an open share group, you have to be at every meal. You know what I mean? There's going to be times you're going to be with these people essentially every week after the large group. So yeah, I don't envision every single position having to be from start to finish every single week, if that makes sense, because that's a significant commitment for sure. Yeah. Any other questions on open share? Mm-hmm. Good question. Step studies are actually on a different night. And so those are on a different night, and they can kind of be any night. Think of it this way: in a typical church kind of gathering, you may have your Sunday school classes that kind of function as Sunday school discipleship group, small groups, and those meet at a specific time and place on Sunday. But then you also may have other people who kind of decide to kind of go deeper and kind of create something that's outside of that time. And so, a group of people could get together any Monday night or Friday night, things like that. The step studies are kind of set up so that they can kind of a little bit less structure in when they meet, if that makes sense. Yeah, so step studies will be a different night. Yeah. And there's flexibility in when those are. So right now the plan is to continue with what we're doing here with Wednesdays. That's kind of the plan. We're just now starting to talk through. We actually just started talking today through what launch looks like, and things like that. But we're pretty certain we're just going to roll with this time that we've set aside here. Yeah, a couple of reasons there. Monday nights, we already have an AA group that meets here in our group, and I have no desire to compete with that. Tuesdays, we have a prayer group that meets in here. Thursdays, there's a ladies' Bible study fellowship, BSF, that meets here. And so, there's some of those that we could tweak if we needed to, but Wednesday just kind of landed pretty naturally there. Yeah. Man, you guys got all the questions. This is good. I like it. Yeah, Dave. Yeah. So, yes. I think that would be the kind of the ultimate we would want, because CR kind of takes you to a certain level essentially, and we want to continue that. And so kind of see that as a natural fit. Like, hey, you're champing this thing, and we want to see you get involved in something else. And so there's that connection there. But there's also the reality that a lot of the folks that come into CR are just like, this is going to be their church home. CR is their church, and we're going to celebrate the heck out of that. We'll mention Sunday what we've got. Like, I would envision there's crossover too, like events or things like that. Like, hey, we're just all coming together, and we'll do that. But there's going to be a whole lot where CR Wednesday night CR is going to be their home church, and yeah, sure, yeah, and vice versa. So here's what I would love and what I would envision is our natural tendency would be, how do we invite our recovery people into what we're doing on Sundays or whatever. What I would love is to also flip that upside down, and how can we as the recovery people invite those crazy church people into what we're doing? You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's there's a recognition of the significance of what's happening at both places, where there are things that we do on a Sunday that, man, our Wednesday night crew, we want them to see that and experience that, and vice versa. We want our Sunday morning crew to experience what's happening. Chrissy, yeah.
We'll meet on another night.
Yes, if we need to finish those up, and that's kind of, as we move a little bit closer, I'm going to try to figure that out, because I don't want there to be a long time of us having that extra, everybody having another night of commitment, and so we're going to figure that out. The reality is that with us launching in end of August or whatever, like, our launch team is going to be quite a bit further ahead than a typical launch team is when they launch, just from everything that I've been talking to people and the way that they set it out. Mostly, like, the requirement is that we finish book 1, and that's only, I don't even know how many lessons. Well, 6 lessons. So we'll be well beyond that. Yeah. So, yeah, Karen. Yeah. I would love to. Yep, and they do. I believe that Pastor Greg said that they do their own separate baptisms. Yeah, so I would envision that absolutely, where we're baptizing them on a Wednesday night for sure. Yeah, good question. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, for sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's true. This will be. Yeah. I think that there will be a lot of cross church attendance here. Whether that's people because I know right now that there are a handful of people who have been involved in CRs in the past who are at other churches around Marysville and have some interest in that, and so. Coming in and maybe even potentially having leadership roles. We're calling ourselves CR here at, well, my goal is that it's CR at the Well. But it's not, we don't own this, right? And so, we certainly want other people to be here, and they may never step foot in here on a Sunday. And that's cool. Yeah, good. All right, you guys are getting all your talkatives out now. I hope you still save some things for your open share, your step study discussion. I don't want to cut any, if you got a burning question, no. Feel free. All right, sweet. Let me just kind of hit the powerless acrostic real quick, and then you'll jump in. So we're talking about this lesson 2, powerless, was kind of our last lesson in principle 1. And so where we admit that we're powerless over our addictions and compulsive behaviors. And so for our acrostic, powerless is a list of serenity robbers, things that kind of take away from us having serenity. And so the first one, P, was pride. Pride. And then the only ifs, the things that we regret or keep us trapped in fantasy land. Worrying can be a form of not trusting God enough. Escape, living in denial. We may escape into a world of fantasy and unrealistic expectations of ourselves and others. Resentments, loneliness, emptiness, selfishness, and separation. So we're encouraged to stop denying the pain, stop playing God, start admitting your powerlessness, and start admitting that your life has become unmanageable. And so with that in mind, let's go ahead and jump into our groups.
All right, hello everyone. As promised from our week 4 CR, as we didn't get to the teaching for the new lesson, promised you that I would teach to a camera. And so here I am, getting ready to teach to a camera, and this will be good. We'll hopefully you'll take a look at this and be ready with your homework for next week. And this session we did our small group discussion based on the idea of powerlessness, and just with the guys' conversation, and then just kind of thinking through this, was just reminded of how important it is that we, as we're on our journey of recovery, that the steps continue, or the principles or the process continues, right? Because we acknowledge that we're powerless, and that is significant. That acknowledges that we need the help of a higher power to get to where we need to go. But the reality is that we don't stay there, right? We don't stay stuck in the powerlessness, and God calls us to something bigger and beyond that. And so I think it's just a reminder of why it's important that we take these steps of recovery. We keep on going, right? We can't just stop with being powerless, because then we get stuck. And so I was just reading just before I came on here to teach this in Colossians, and this was just a great reminder, and kind of a picture of the hope that we have, and hope's what we're going to talk about here in just a second. But Colossians chapter 2, verse 13 says, "When you were dead in your sins and in the uncircumcision of your sinful nature, God made you alive with Christ. He forgave us all of our sins, having canceled the written code with its regulations that was against us and that stood opposed to us. He took it away, nailing it to the cross. And having disarmed the powers and authorities, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross." Man, what a picture of the hope that we have. That we don't have to stay stuck in our powerlessness, right? We don't have to stay stuck in our human sinful nature. God gives us hope. And so that's what we're going to talk about right now. Our next lesson, lesson 3, is hope. And so on lesson 3, we're now moving on to principle 2. And so in principle 2, we state that we earnestly believe that God exists, that I matter to him, and that he has the power to help me recover. And then coupled with that is step 2 from the 12 steps. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And so again, we're moving on to principle 2, where we earnestly believe that God exists, we matter to him, and he has the power to help us recover. Where we were powerless, we come to believe that God is powerful and God can help us out of this. Hebrews 11:6 tells us that anyone who comes to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Psalm 62:5 says, "Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from him." So in the first principle, we admitted that we were powerless. And it's through this admission of our powerlessness that we are able to believe and receive God's power to help us recover. We do need to be careful, though, that we're not just trying to, once again, cover the bottomless pit of our hurts and our habits and our hang-ups with layers and layers of denial or trying some quick fix to get out of that. Instead, we need to continue doing what we're doing through Celebrate Recovery, where we are keeping those hurts, habits, and hang-ups exposed to the light so that through God's power, they can truly heal. So it's in the second principle that we come to believe that God exists, that we are actually important to him, and that we are able to find that one true higher power, which we believe is Jesus Christ. And so we come to understand that God wants to fill our lives with his love, his joy, and his presence. And so in Scripture, perhaps no Scripture reveals this quite like Luke 15 in the story of the prodigal son. And so this is obviously a story that Jesus tells about a father's love for his lost son. In fact, his love for both of his sons. But it's actually pointing us to a picture of the love that God the Father has for each one of us. God's love is looking for you. No matter how lost you feel, no matter how shackled by shame you may be, the reality is that God's love is searching and looking and pursuing you. God's searching love can in fact find you. No matter how many times you may have fallen into sin or fallen short, God's hands of mercy are reaching out to pick you up and love you and forgive you. And it's in that beautiful picture of God's extravagant love that we can then find hope. And so that brings us to our beloved CR acrostic, hope. So here we go. If you have hopefully you took your papers home with you and you have those. But the H stands for higher power. Our higher power is the one and only true higher power. And that higher power, we believe, has a name that is Jesus Christ. The thing that gives us hope is that we get to have personal relationship with Jesus, that higher power. You will see that Jesus desires a hands-on, day-to-day, moment-to-moment relationship with us. For he can do for us what we have never been able to do for ourselves. And the way that relationship begins is with belief. And so that takes us back to the first four words of step number 2, where it says, we came to believe. And so saying that we came to believe kind of in anything describes a process, right? Belief is a result of consideration, doubt, reasoning, and concluding, and sometimes going back through those steps over and over, but eventually coming to this place where we say we came to believe. 2 Corinthians 12:9, Jesus tells us that my grace is enough for you. For where there is weakness, or as we talked about last week, powerlessness, my power is shown more completely. And that gives us hope. So the next letter in hope is O. And O stands for openness to change. Excuse me while I take a drink. What is the process that leads to solid belief, which leads you to change your life? Let's look at those first four words of step 2 again, where it says, we came to believe. The words there are very intentional. We came to believe, meaning that we took the first steps, right? We took the first steps of joining in the Celebrate Recovery launch team. We took the first steps of being involved in this step study discussion. We took the steps of stopping denying our hurts, habits, and our hang-ups. And then we ultimately say that we started to believe and receive God's power to help us recover, right? We're doing this because we believe that God's power is sufficient. So hope is openness to change. Sometimes, though, the reality is that we're afraid to change. Even if our past or our current situations are painful, we sometimes resist change because of our fear of the unknown. Or maybe in our despair, we think we don't deserve anything better. But here's the good news. Hope opens doors where despair closes them. Hope discovers what can be done instead of grumbling about what can't be done. Throughout your life, you will continue to encounter hurts and trials that you are powerless to change. But with God's help, you can be open to allow those circumstances and situations to change you, to make you better and not bitter. Ephesians 4:23 gives us a challenge with that in mind. It says, now your attitudes and thoughts must all be constantly changing for the better. You must be a new and different person. And so how will we do that? Well, the letter P tells us about the power to change. In the past, we may have wanted to change and were unable to do so. We could not free ourselves from our hurts and habits and hang-ups. But in principle 2, we understand that God's power can change us and our situation. You all know Philippians 4:13, right? For I can do everything God asks me to with the help of Christ who gives me the strength and power. Power to change comes from God's grace. You see, hope draws its power from a deep trust in God, like that of the psalmist who wrote, lead me, teach me, for you are the God who gives me salvation. I have no hope except in you. And so in principle 2, we begin to understand that God's power can change us and can change our situation. And once we're willing to tap into that power, right actions like Christ-like actions will follow naturally as kind of byproducts of working the principles and following the one and only higher power, Jesus Christ. And so the last letter in hope is obviously E. And so E is expect to change. Expect to change. Remember, you are only at the second principle, right? We're only at the second principle. And as I talked about at the beginning here, the importance of continuing on in these steps. We don't want to quit before the miracle happens, right? With God's help, the changes that we have longed for are coming, right? They're coming as we continue to follow these steps in these principles. Philippians 1:6 expresses that hope. I am sure that God who began the good work within you will keep right on helping you grow in his grace until his task within you is finally finished on that day when Jesus Christ returns. I find it reassuring to know that you don't need large amounts of faith to begin the recovery process. Scripture tells us that we only need a small amount, as small as a mustard seed, to effect change, to begin our move, to begin to move our mountains of hurts, hang-ups, and habits. So, there's hope. Again, hope that we don't have to stay in our powerlessness. We don't have to stay stuck where we're at. We can actually rely on the grace of God and the love of God to move us forward. And that gives us great hope. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. And can't wait to be with you again on Wednesday. Have a great day.